From Channel 4, the local station, this is an Election 2015 special. Jacksonville Sheriff's Debate. Crime is a concern for many in Jacksonville, following a recent wave of violence linked to local gangs. The two men in the race to replace Sheriff John Rutherford talk about how they'd tackle the growing problem.
I intend to hit it head on with a proactive street crimes unit that's going to address all these issues that the gangs are doing.
Keeping our, the youth in our community active and engaged is something beyond standing on the street corner.
But leading the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is about more than just fighting crime. It's managing a city's department with thousands of employees and a nearly $400 million budget. They've been squaring off over their qualifications in TV ads.
I've run a $200 million budget, commanded over 1,500 officers in homicide, robbery, the bomb squad, the SWAT team, and Homeland Security.
My opponent says he's led every major department at the JSO. 6 months here, a year there. What do we have to show for it?
Tonight's your chance to hear where the candidates stand on all issues facing JSO. Now, from the campus of Jacksonville University, your moderator, Channel 4's Kent Justice.
And good evening and welcome to our 2015 Sheriff's Debate. We are so glad that you've joined us tonight, both online and on air. You know, coming up on Tuesday, May 19th, we're all going to head to the polls for Jacksonville's general election. So for the next hour, those of you at home and here in our audience at the Terry Concert Hall here at Jacksonville University, you're going to hear from the two remaining candidates for sheriff. We're going to introduce those candidates in just a moment. First, however, here is the director of Jacksonville University's Public Policy Institute, Mr. Rick Mullaney.
Good evening, and welcome to Jacksonville University. Tonight's debate, co-hosted by Channel 4 and the Public Policy Institute here at Jacksonville University, you will have an opportunity to hear directly from Ken Jefferson and Mike Williams. One of these two men will be the next sheriff for the city of Jacksonville. Make no mistake, with a $400 million budget, nearly 3,000 employees, and countywide responsibility due to Jacksonville's consolidated government, the Sheriff of Duval County is one of the most important law enforcement officers in the state of Florida. Tonight, these candidates will directly address the most important public safety issues facing our community: violent crime, the homicide rate, making our community safe, and much, much more. At the Public Policy Institute, we believe your vote matters, and we sincerely hope tonight's debate will be of help to you in casting your vote. On behalf of Channel 4, and on behalf of Jacksonville University, we want to welcome you, and we want to thank our candidates for their participation, and we hope you'll enjoy tonight's debate. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Rick Mullaney, and thank you, Jacksonville University. So, at this point, let's welcome our two candidates to the stage in alphabetical order. They are Mr. Ken Jefferson, a Democrat, and Mike Williams, the Republican candidate tonight. These candidates will soon make their opening statements, and then we will begin the questioning. I want to make sure you understand how the questioning will go tonight. I'm going to pose a question to a specific candidate, and then they'll have 1 minute to respond. The other candidate will have a minute to respond as well. And then each candidate will have 30 seconds for rebuttals. As moderator, I do have some discretion to ask follow-up questions, and then the candidates will have 30 seconds to respond to those questions as well. The questions have been developed tonight by our News for Jax political team and solicited from viewers like you through social media. Later in our debate, the candidates are also going to have a chance to ask a question of each other. The candidate at that point will take 20 seconds to pose a question. The candidate receiving the question has 60 seconds to respond, and if needed, the candidate who asked the question will get 30 seconds for a rebuttal. All right, so during the debate, we will let the candidates know how much time they have with some colored paddles that are right here off stage, right in front of the candidates. They'll be known at 30 seconds, 15 seconds left, a yellow paddle will go up, and again, when the time is up, a red paddle goes up. You may hear a ding in the background when the time is up. So we've got just one commercial break for you tonight, and that's going to happen about halfway through our debate. And then after all the questioning is done, we want to hear what you say. We want you to participate tonight. You're going to have a chance to go to newsforjax.com or pick up your News for Jax mobile app and tell us who you think won the debate. Now, you're not going to be able to vote yet. We want you to listen to all the answers first, but toward the end, I'll remind you how you can participate in that. And then voting will just be open during the closing statements for the candidates tonight. 1 hour ago, we flipped a coin to determine the order for the opening statements, as well as to determine who will get the first question tonight and the order of closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their opening statement, and based on that coin flip tonight, Ken Jefferson, we'd like to hear your opening statement.
Thank you, Kent. Good evening. I want to thank WGXT as well as JU Public Policy Institute for hosting this debate, a lively debate between these two candidates. The most compelling issues in our city right now is violent crime. I understand that. There's a veil of violence that's hovering over our city. I can help turn that around with your help. Back in August of last year, I published a plan detailing how I intend to attack the violent crime, the drug crime, and the gang activity here in our city. That plan has been on the books for 9 months. And in that plan, it describes how we can do better together. I understand, I also pledged that I will reduce the violent crime, drug activity, and gang activity by 25%. But I understand that that's a lofty goal, and I can't do it by myself. I'm going to need your help in this fight against crime. My name is Ken Jefferson, and I look forward to this debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jefferson. Mike Williams, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Kent. There's a new generation of police officers at JSO, and one of us is ready to lead it. I spent 23 years serving this community and worked my way through the ranks, serving at every leadership level in the agency, and ended my career eventually leading 1,100 police officers day to day and managing half the agency's $400 million budget. Tonight, my opponent will tell you that he's never supervised anyone, but he's been a leader. The truth is, in 3 administrations under Sheriff McMillan, Sheriff Glover, and Sheriff Rutherford, no one asked Ken to lead anything. We have real issues in our community that require real experience. My name is Mike Williams, and I'm looking forward to your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. All right, thank you, candidates, as we get started with opening statements there. As I mentioned, we also flipped a coin, a very unusual coin, apparently, always coming up heads or tails, one of the two. And in that case, Mr. Jefferson is going to receive this first question. Here's the topic. It's on gangs. JSO revealed last month that there are 47 documented gangs in Jacksonville, and we heard with about 1,200 members. When a JSO director at that news conference announced gang involvement in recent killings in April, he promised gangs. He said, gangs in Jacksonville, I want you to know, JSO is coming after you. The state attorney's office has a prosecutor named Rich Manti that we talked to, who tells us that most gang members are between 16 and 24, but some of them are as young as 12 years old. So with so many of those gang members juveniles, do you have to change tactics in addressing the issue? Or do you go after them as you would adults? And what has changed in the tactics used to fight gangs from, say, 10 years ago compared to now? Mr. Jefferson.
Well, the tactics are pretty simple. You'll have to be proactive. But let me back up. The JSO is now responding to all of the violence that's happening here in our city. It's a reaction. Back in 2006, my opponent headed the gang unit. He was in charge of the gang unit. At that time, he said that there were only 16 gangs with 160 gang members in our city in 2009. He came back in 2010 and said that there were 30 identified gangs with 400 members in 2010. But they did nothing about it. They allowed them to organize. He allowed them to fester. He allowed them to corrupt this city by not being proactive. Now, all of a sudden, we've got all these people ready to be reactive with the sheriff's office, with the state attorney's office. But my opponent was in charge of the gang unit and did nothing. He failed. Now gangs are wreaking havoc in our community.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Mike Williams, address that for me, especially the juveniles component of that.
Correct. Ken's partially correct. I created the Gang Investigation Unit for JSO back in 2006, and we had a really intense focus on enforcement activity with gang issues, and have done a good job in the last several years. We've targeted gangs using RICO statutes and done a lot to certify gang members, which really makes that number grow, really sets those gang members up for prosecution, for enhanced prosecution, and those RICO charges. So again, we've done a lot in terms of enforcement. But to get ahead of the gang issue in our community, enforcement is not the only piece of the puzzle. We've got to work the prevention end. You mentioned a 12-year-old gang member. We have got to get kids at a younger age, get them involved in things, get them involved in after-school programs, youth development issues, and we've got to get, reach that young boy and girl and keep them off that street corner so they never meet that gang member or drug dealer. That's the way to get ahead of the gang issue in our community. We've done a good job of enforcement, but I can tell you that without the prevention piece of that puzzle, we're never going to get ahead of the issue here in our community.
I want to dive into that a little bit more, and I want to start maybe with some of what Mr. Jefferson just mentioned. So,
Sure.
Mike Williams, question to you. So if you started that gang unit in 2006, you also said that you served in the Attorney General's Gang Reduction Task Force, claim that leadership experience for JSO qualifies you to be sheriff. So if all that's true, if you've been in leadership for years with the agency, then why haven't you or your agency put an end to gangs in Jacksonville in that past 10 years almost?
Well, good question. I can tell you this, that when you talk about prevention issues in our community, that is a community-wide effort. So as an entire community, we have to really join together. And we've done that in recent years, going back just as far as 2011, when we had the Jacksonville Journey completely funded, and those programs were active and really robust. You know, we had murder totals in Jacksonville as low as they've been since 1970. We were engaging youth at a young age. We had an additional 147 police officers on the street in 11. We also had all 92 community service officers on the street. So that combination of things worked for us in 2011. So we've had success in that area. But again, when you talk about the issue, the gang issue in our community, it's not just enforcement, which we've done a good job of. It's about prevention and intervention as well, and those are community-wide efforts. We've got to do a better job of engaging the community and helping us with that issue.
Yeah, Mr. Jefferson, you want to address that?
I do.
I've got a specific question for you on the topic as
That
well.
response sounds good, and it sounds like it's straight out of my playbook that was published 9 months ago, being proactive in getting young people involved at an early age, between the ages of 9 and 12. I've always contended that we've got to get them at a young age so that the gang members won't recruit them. You get them in that most impressionable stages of life, when they're impressionable, when they're looking for a role model, when they're wondering what they want to be, when they're trying to figure this thing out called life, and you teach them how to respect authority. You teach them how to resolve conflict without a final resolution. You teach them values. You teach them how to set goals, all of which I put in my plan. And we can do it because I've done it before. I've been very, very successful. It received national attention. I was recognized by the United States Congress, the United States Navy, and the United States Department of Justice for and the FBI for our efforts in prevention. So it's straight out of the playbook, and I'm glad he responded that way.
So you're saying that his answer is your answer?
I'm saying that my answer is his answer.
I think we might have said the same thing. So let me make a pointed question to you. Ken Jefferson, you haven't led a division in the sheriff's office. You haven't led the gang task force. Without that experience and that expertise, why do you think that, as sheriff, rather than as patrolman or what have you, you can destroy the influence and presence of gangs in Jacksonville? How can you accomplish maybe even what you just talked about right there?
My opponent is right. I've not been a supervisor within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office after serving for 24 years. He's been a supervisor on the sergeant level, lieutenant level, and so on and so forth. The difference between he and I and the effectiveness is that I have a measurable success level. Everywhere I've been able to serve, I've raised the level of performance. And I don't have to be a supervisor to be a leader. And that's what I was, a leader. Everywhere that I've served, I've led. And you know what else? This rank thing about being qualified for sheriff, there are several successful sheriffs in our county that never had rank. Dave Scott in Lee County, Sheriff Mescara in St. Lucie County. They're on the same level that I am, but they're all two-term sheriffs being very, very successful. So the rank thing, because my opponent spent most of his career in the SWAT unit, being over the SWAT, being a SWAT officer, that's just a flashbang, a distraction to try to get you off the issues.
All right. Mr. Williams? And I'm going to remind our audience they're not supposed to be cheering. All right, that's the moderator glare right there. All right.
I think the examples that Ken raised are really apples and oranges. We have in Jacksonville a law enforcement agency that has 3,000 employees and a budget of $400 million. I think you need experience at the executive level to be able to manage that. And we've done, again, a good job of in many areas over the past several years. Listen, nobody's perfect, but we've done a good job, and we've done a good job for this community. But to say that you don't need that experience moving forward, to lead an organization our size, and to reach down and pick two very small counties in the state and use those as examples, again, are apples and oranges, and really not an effective comparison.
All right. All right, I'm going to move on to a topic about reducing violent crime. And, Mike, you're going to get this question first here. Pastor Mark Griffin of the AME Ministers Alliance recently said in an interview, all we need to do is go back to the year 2006, which was the absolute worst time in Jacksonville when it came to crime and violence. But we came up with a strategy that worked. And from 2007 through 2011, we saw the murder rate decline each and every year. This is not a black problem. This is not a Northwest Quadrant problem. This is a Jacksonville problem that, if we're not careful, can turn into the type of problems we're seeing in Baltimore. So, Mike, first to you. Since each of you were in JSO in 2006, what did you learn then that applies now and can turn around the numbers in violent crime?
Listen, Mark's exactly right. In 2006, we had an incredible spike in violence, much like we're seeing now in Jacksonville. That initiated the Jacksonville Journey. That initiated for us Operation Safe Streets, where before we engaged in any enforcement activity, we went to these neighborhoods and knocked on 77,000 doors. Told the people in those communities what we needed. We need your help. We're going to be in the neighborhood working on the shootings, working on the gang issues in that community. We were incredibly successful in Operation Safe Streets. The Jacksonville Journey continued to grow in funding. And in 2011, when we had some additional police officers on the street, the entire CSO program was developed during that window. And again, the Journey was funded completely. We had murder totals in Jacksonville as low as they've been since 1970. We had 72 murders in 1970 and 71 murders in 2011. So today, I think we only need to look back to that 2011 window, see what's missing, and replace that. We'll have some success if we do that.
So I'm going to come back to you in a second here. Ken Jefferson, I'd like your response there. What did you learn in 2006 that applies now and can turn the numbers around in terms of...
Well, I learned in 2006 that we needed a leader that could address proactivity. My opponent was in charge of the gang unit, and when we look at gangs, gangs are the primary problem of crime. They're murdering folks, they're robbing folks, they're sexually assaulting. So whenever you talk about gang activity, you're talking about violence, violent crime being perpetrated by that. In 2006, again, Operation Safe Street was a reaction. In the time of peace is the time you prepare for war. You don't wait till things happen and then you knock on 77,000 doors and say, hey, we need your help. You need to knock on those doors and build the relationship up with the community first and build that trust back up. And that's what I'll do as your next sheriff. I'll be out in the street, knocking on doors, walking the neighborhoods, playing with the kids, interacting with the people so that in the time of war, when we need to bond together, we can do better together and we'll stop this violent crime in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Mr. Williams, do you want to rebuttal there?
Listen, I think that any time in law enforcement, when you see an issue, you have to react to it. I think that's the natural inclination of law enforcement, to react to those things. I think the measure there is, were you successful? And how did you react? And again, we reacted by reaching out to that community. I'll tell you this, we need to do more of reaching out to the community every day. I would agree with that. But I can tell you that we've been successful in that. You don't see that tactic anywhere else in the country, where you engage the community before you engage in enforcement activity. We've done it multiple times in Jacksonville and been very successful with it.
All right. Mr. Jefferson, anything else to say?
There's a great disconnect between the community and the police right now. If that was so successful, why is there such a big gap between the relationship? And it's not just a Jacksonville issue. It's a nationwide issue. We've got to build the relationship back up with the community. We've got to embrace a community. I've had the opportunity to stay overnight in some of the highest crime areas here in our city, only because I want the people to feel like they're relevant, that they're not forgotten about, and that we do care about them. And as your next sheriff, I will continue my overnight stays. I will continue walking in the neighborhoods. I will continue to help fight crime with that community.
All right, thank you very much. Well, that leads right into the topic I wanted to cover here. Many people pointed to the racial makeup of law enforcement when it came to the civil unrest we saw last year in Ferguson, Missouri, noting the disparity between the community demographics and then the members of the police force. In a story we aired last week, we discovered that in Jacksonville, the comparison among races is not a very wide gap. 30% of Duval County is African American, 28% of the sheriff's office also African American. So how do you develop trust between law enforcement and minority communities if seeing the same race behind the badge has not worked or isn't working? And we begin, Ken, with you.
Well, you have to work hard on that every day. The department, and it will, under my leadership, will resemble the community that we serve. It's a fact that when you have a racially balanced department that's balanced with the community, you're more effective. It's easier to build a relationship. It's easier to understand the plight of certain cultures, certain people. I had the opportunity to serve as an administrative detective in the Inspections and Accreditation Unit, and to be nationally accredited, you have to have a department that resembles the community. As your sheriff, I will be the chief recruiter going out, looking for the best and the brightest men and women to serve this city, this county, and to look the part of the community. She's telling me my time is up.
Mr. Williams.
You know, I think you only have to look to Baltimore to see that sometimes this is not a complete race issue. I mean, absolutely, a law enforcement agency in any part of the country has got to be reflective of the community that it serves. But it's more about the communication, and it's more about transparency. You have to work to build that trust every day. You do it through communication. You do it through transparency. And again, we will look like, and do now, the community that we serve. But I think, again, beyond that, you've got to reach out, you've got to communicate, and you've got to be transparent in your processes to allow people in the community to engage with you in those processes.
All right, Mr. Jefferson, if you want 30 seconds.
It doesn't really look like the community that serves, because we have a large, growing Hispanic population right now, and we don't have that many Hispanic officers that's there. You have to be able to balance it. You just can't say that the department looks like the community it serves without knowing the true facts. So it's something that we have to work on every day, and as the sheriff, being the chief recruiter, I'll make sure that that happens.
Mr. Williams, 30 seconds.
Well, I would agree. You do work on that every day. It's something you'd never take your eye off the ball, because if you do, you can find yourself, in a situation where you may have some issues. But again, it is something you work on every day, and it's something we'll continue to work on every day, beginning day one for me.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now, we do have many more questions still to come for our two candidates for sheriff, including questions that they have for each other. You're going to see that in just a moment. Our Elections 2015 special, our Jacksonville Sheriff's Debate, is going to be back in 2 more minutes, so stay with us.
Need cash? Need it in an instant? Then you need InstaLoan. Get $1,000, $2,000, even $3,000 InstaFast. InstaLoan offers signature loans, personal loans, and loans on your car. If it's InstaFast, it must be InstaLoan.
What did we do today? Well, before dance class, we cleaned 15,000 pounds of laundry for local hospitals, unpacked 1,500 cases of food for the commissary shelves at Mayport Naval Station, and served almost 6,000 customers at a local clothing store. How did we do it all? We just donated to Goodwill. Goodwill provides jobs and job training for thousands of people in North Florida every year. Donate, shop, jobs. Good things for North Florida with Goodwill.
This week at Ashley Furniture Home Store, it's our best Memorial Day sale ever, with huge price reductions store-wide or no interest until January 2021. Choose from hundreds of sofas and sectionals. Find amazing savings on beds for the whole family and our newest dining room exclusively at Ashley. Price reductions this week or no interest until January 2021. It's our biggest Memorial Day sale ever. Hurry in today. Ashley Furniture Home Store. This is home.
We try to maintain a family type of atmosphere. We don't want to be remote, distant lawyers that are standing in front of law books. We try to be friendly. We try to not be aloof. We try not to lecture to our clients. We handle thousands and thousands of cases over the years. But this is our clients' one case. It's their injury. We want to represent them. We want to do what they want us to do, and we take the time to explain it to them.
Need cash now? TitleMax can turn your car title into cash. Get the cash you need in as fast as 30 minutes. All it takes is a vehicle with a clear car title and a valid ID to get started. Bring your car title to TitleMax and say, I got my title back with TitleMax.
And welcome back to our Election 2015 special, Jacksonville Sheriff's Debate from the campus of Jacksonville University. We've been hearing from our candidates tonight, Democrat Ken Jefferson and Republican Mike Williams. We also want to hear what you say tonight. After our debate, we're to hear from you about who you think won the debate tonight. After the questioning is done, we're going to give you an opportunity to vote in an online poll. You can do that by going to news4jax.com or by using your mobile device, and our News4Jax mobile app will share results at the end of our debate tonight. So right now, we're giving the candidates a chance to ask each other a question. They'll do that for 20 seconds, and then the respondent gets a minute, and the person who asked the question may get 30 seconds after that. A coin toss decides who asks the questions first. Mr. Williams, you get to ask the first question.
Thank you, Kent. Ken, you've mentioned on numerous occasions, because of your lack of budget experience, that you would hire a CFO to help you run the budget. You've also mentioned, because of your lack of executive experience, that you would surround your people or surround yourself with people that can help you run the organization. You've also mentioned that you would farm out the officer-involved shootings to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. My question to you is, what part of the responsibilities of sheriff are you going to keep, and what part are you going to continue to farm out?
Thank you. I never said I was lacking in budget experience. The CFO already exists in the form of a budget chief, so I'm not creating a position. I did say that I will turn all police-involved shootings over to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for them to conduct all inquiries regarding police-involved shootings, to show transparency, to save taxpayers money by not having to pay our cold case detectives pager pay, as well as response time pay, time and a half. It's prudent, it's wise, and as far as surrounding yourself with good people, you should know that. You were a director. You have to surround yourself with good people because your success or failure depends on the people you surround yourself with.
Mr. Williams, would like 30 seconds here?
Well, again, I would say to Ken that I've actually had the experience of surrounding myself with good people. It's not something I'll do as day one as sheriff.
All right. All right, Mr. Jefferson, you have an opportunity to ask Mr. Williams a question at this point.
Sure, Mike. Will you promise the citizens of Jacksonville that you will stop the nonsense of silly politics with negative ads on television and stick to the issues at hand while our kids are lying in a pool of blood on the streets?
Listen, I can tell you this. There are things that this community needs to know before they select their next sheriff. And I think the experience of the men in this race is incredibly important. And I believe the fact that you've never supervised one person at JSO, I believe the fact that you've never held any rank, you've never managed $1 of the budget, and you've never been responsible for reducing crime in this community by 1% is an important factor. And it's something that should be known. And again, I believe experience is a big factor in this race. This is, after all, a big job interview for this community, and these are things that people need to know.
All right. Mr. Jefferson, you want 30 seconds?
I would take that as a resounding no. And the fact that you say that I've not been successful, in essence, is what you're saying. Everywhere I've gone, I have a proven track record of everywhere that I had the opportunity to serve. I brought national recognition to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office on more than one occasion. I'm the only spokesman in the state of Florida ever to be named Spokesman of the Year for the entire state of Florida. So I bring experience, I bring knowledge. My opponent brings supervision skills. I bring leadership. And that's what our city needs right now, is a leader in the Sheriff's Office.
All right. Mike, do you want to respond to that? I'll give you 30
I can.
seconds.
Listen, Ken had an honorable career, a 24-year career, but it was a career as a line-level employee. You would never take a bank teller and let them run the bank. You would never take a private in the Army and let them be a general. And that's the analogy that we have here today. So I think, it's, again, the experience is incredibly important, and people should evaluate that.
And you would never take a director who
30 seconds for a rebuttal.
And you never would take a director who couldn't reduce crime when gangs were festering and piling up, and now the chickens have come home to roost, and we're seeing violence every day. Just turn on your television every day. So why would you want a director who was in the position, who says he manages a budget but couldn't stop crime?
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's talk about.
Can I respond to that just 1 second?
I've been counting, and each of you have gotten a couple of times to respond there. So I'm going to move on, Mr. Williams. Sorry about that. Let's talk about police training, tactics, techniques there for police training. In the course of the campaign, we've heard a lot of people talking about a need for improved training. We just discussed a moment ago improved diversity on the police force. There's a push for law enforcement agencies to use body cameras. So JSO is better in these areas of training than they were 20 years ago, right? But we're still talking about these areas need to be improved. Here's my question, beginning with you, Mike Williams. What really changes it, and what changes really make a difference that we're talking about?
Changes in training. What really changes in training make a difference? Listen, training is not a rubber stamp. You can't train people in the police academy and turn them loose for a 20, 25-year career and never refresh or reinvigorate that training. And we do a good job of that at JSO. You always take an opportunity, though, when you can, to take a big picture look at the training program. I'll tell you, in Las Vegas, they recently took a look at police shootings, went back 20 years, and evaluated every police shooting, not whether or not the shootings were justified or not, but was there something they could learn about those shootings to incorporate into training programs to prevent shootings in the community? Was there something officers were doing prior to getting themselves in a position where they had to use deadly force? And that's the kind of things that we need to do at JSO and that we will do at JSO. You constantly evaluate your training. You're always refreshing training and keeping officers on the cutting edge of what's going on in law enforcement and using ideas from the country. And again, we'll do that beginning day one.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Jefferson?
We have to look at the trend of crimes. We have to look at what's going on around us, but particularly here locally. Improved training would definitely have to be done in the mental health area. I would partner with mental health professionals to train our officers to be aware and cognizant of mental health issues with persons that they're dealing with. We need to have more training with our homeless people, to know how to deal with them, to have options for them versus incarceration. And then the wave of the future is going to be body cameras, regardless of what anyone says. We just had a police-involved shooting just yesterday, and maybe the body cameras, if they had been outfitted with the body cameras, would give us the full story based on what actually happened versus just what we're hearing right now. Without having all of the facts and knowing exactly what happened, we have to depend on evidence. We have to depend on independent witnesses coming forward. We have to depend on the information coming from the officers. So as your sheriff, the improved training would be in mental health awareness, how to deal with our homeless veterans, as well as body cameras.
Thank you. I'd like to expand on that. And Ken, I'm going to direct the first question to you, Mr. Jefferson. Mike, you'll answer next. But when it comes to body cameras, so many questions come up, many issues, including privacy issues, cost of the video storage, managing many hours of footage on all that. Viewer sent us this question asking, as an alternative to police wearing cameras, would you embrace Jacksonville citizens openly gathering video of police officers performing their duties in public? Mr. Jefferson.
Well, I wouldn't have to embrace that because they have the right to do that, and it's being done every day. With regards to body cameras, you're right. There are some questions and there are some issues, and I would look at those questions and I would address those issues. But in the meantime, we've got different things that's happening that these body cameras, the wave of the future, could possibly help us with. For instance, based on studies already with agencies that have body cameras, they've been used to exonerate officers. They've been used to go against what people are alleging that happened. They have a very, very good use. So with all of the issues that's going on, I think because federal funding is right now available, it'll be prudent for us to invest into those body cameras and make good use of them and work the kinks out as we go along.
Mr. Williams, if you'd address, just to start at least, would you embrace Jacksonville citizens using cameras to videotape officers performing their duties in public?
Sure, and well, again, it happens today. I mean, we see video footage and photographs every day in investigations that that are taken by citizens in this community. And when it comes to body cameras, I think that we are going to get 99.9% of the video that we take is going to be a lot of great policemen doing a lot of great work. But we've got some questions we have to answer about that program. The one-time federal money is not going to sustain that program long term. We don't want to start it and then lose it. We've got serious privacy issues that the legislature is now attempting to deal with when it comes to public records laws. You don't want a neighbor to be able to reach out and grab a body cam video of an incident that occurred inside your home, where there was no arrest and there's no ongoing investigation. And the state of current public records laws allows them to do that. So we've got issues even beyond costs that we need to work through before we get involved in this program. I'm not against the program, but again, I think we have to be prudent and we have to weigh those options and get into a program that we can maintain and sustain in our agency.
Yeah, Mr. Jefferson.
I think we can learn from agencies that already have body cameras. They have several agencies out west that actually have body cameras, and a lot of those issues that my opponent is bringing up are not relevant right now. That doesn't mean that they won't be later on. But I think it's prudent for us to look into it. With regards to federal funding, it's the first time federal funding that help us get a jump start on it. But there are many more grants and funds available for us to sustain that program.
Mr. Williams, last word on this topic if you want, 30 seconds.
I just don't believe you count on federal money to help you sustain a program that's going to be really so important for this agency moving forward. You have to budget that. You have to be able to sustain and maintain that in your own budget.
All right, thank you. All right, let's, and I'm going to start with you, Mr. Williams, on this, but a viewer sent us this question, a former police officer, as a matter of fact, citing that homicide and violent crime led to the creation of Jacksonville Journey in 2008. I've heard each of you mention that previously. The recommendation, that is, for police presence included adding 101 patrol officers, 124 corrections officers, 38 civilian positions. I looked this up just recently. Budget cuts, as we know, have forced the loss of 147 officers in the Community Service Officers Program. So this viewer's question is, do you believe more officers leads to lower crime? And if not, then how will you address the murder rate and violent crime as sheriff, if not through adding more officers?
Well,
Mr. Williams.
generally speaking, adding officers can reduce crime, absolutely. You have to deploy them effectively, you have to manage them effectively, but that absolutely can happen. Again, we only need to look back to 2011, where we had the murder rate in Jacksonville as low as it has been since 1970. And what's missing today from what we had in place in 2011? What's missing is 147 police officers, a community service officer program of 92 officers that was a terrific force multiplier for us. They did things we did not need a gun and badge to do. They would pick up evidence, work minor crashes on the side of the road, and allowed these officers time to be down in neighborhoods, handling calls for service, building relationships. Again, a great force multiplier for us. And we had the Jacksonville Journey, engaging our youth with prevention programs. You know, we have the Police Athletic League with the Sheriff's Office, and we do a terrific job with that. But the scope of the journey and the scale of the journey was what we needed in Jacksonville. When those three things were in place, violent crime in Jacksonville was dropping in double digits. Murder totals were, as I just mentioned. That's, again, only 4 years ago. So we've got a roadmap of how to solve this problem. We need to work to get back to it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Jefferson.
The Jacksonville Journey was a great program. I'll have to agree there. It provided the resources. It provided all of the things that was needed to saturate areas, to hit hot spots, and to even have programs for children, all of which are on my plan, once again, that I published 9 months ago. I didn't steal it from the Journey, but it is there. We've got to realize that the role of a sheriff is to not make excuses. If we don't get 147 officers that the sheriff fired, if I'm elected as your sheriff, I will not come to you and cry and throw somebody else under the bus for my inefficiency as the sheriff to reduce crime. You have to take the leadership role and take responsibility for the office, and I'll do that.
Do you want a 30-second rebuttal, Mr. Williams?
I would just say, look, this is about solving the issue at hand. And the best way to solve the issue at hand is to look where solutions have been found before. Solutions were found in 2011, when, again, we had the officers on the street. We had the Community Service Officers Program up and running, and the Jacksonville Journey was fully funded. Again, you only need to look back at those numbers from that year to see what those resources got you. That's where we need to work to get back to.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Jefferson, on the topic?
I look forward to the Journey being refunded, again, because it is a great tool. It is a big help, but if it's not refunded, if they don't provide us with additional officers, if they don't provide us with additional resources, I'm the sheriff. I'm responsible. And I'm not going to throw the mayor under the bus, and I'm not going to throw anybody else under the bus. I'm responsible for stopping crime, preventing crime, and being proactive here in Jacksonville. And as your sheriff, that's what I'll do.
All right, thank you. Mr. Jefferson, I'll start with you on this one. You alluded to this earlier, so let's dive in a little bit more. Let's talk about retaining officers or recruiting officers, even comparing to other agencies in the state which don't require a bachelor's degree. I understand that JSO's salary is 20% lower than those other agencies. So what would you do as sheriff to recruit and retain the best officers to serve the city of Jacksonville?
Well, Ken, I had the opportunity to serve as a police recruiter, traveling all over the state of Florida, as well as outside of the state of Florida, looking for the best and the brightest to come and work for the most premier law enforcement agency in the state of Florida, this side of heaven. It was an honor for me to do that. I look forward to doing that again. But unfortunately, because of pension issues and budget issues, our agency has become a stepping stone agency where officers will come and they'll get the training and they'll stay for a year or two, and then they'll leave because of the uncertainty of their future. I look to change that. I look at changing the qualifications, or give it a real good evaluation. The qualifications of having a 4-year degree versus experience as a military person. There are so many men and women who serve our country on a daily basis, and when they retire the military, they want to serve it on a local basis. We can't give them the opportunity if they don't have a 4-year degree. So I'm looking to change that, to provide the opportunities for folks so that we can build this agency back up through the best and the brightest persons.
Mr. Williams, how do you recruit and retain the best?
You know, the recruiting and retention issue for us has really been impacted by the pay and benefit package that we have here at JSO, and we've got to work to get the pension issue under control and resolved. I think once we do that, then we do look at pathways to allow people with military experience an easier pathway onto the agency, people with prior law enforcement experience an easier pathway onto the agency, and require that bachelor's degree for promotion. But have an avenue so we can, again, expand the doorway and allow more people to come on the agency. You know, we lose some very qualified candidates in that process that maybe don't have a bachelor's degree. So we need to look again to expand those avenues and develop a competitive pay and benefit package with communities like Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and in some cases Atlanta. Those are the communities we need to be competing with, and that's the options that we need to put on the table for new recruits.
Yeah, Mr. Jefferson, you mentioned that you had experience recruiting. What's the one thing that will bring in that new person to become an officer, or keep them when they are thinking about, yeah, I've been here a couple years, I'm getting out?
Yeah, I think it's all about leadership. You have to lead from the front. They follow examples of leadership from the sheriff all the way down the pyramid. The leadership example is followed. When you have consistency with staff, when you have consistency with supervisors, you have consistency with line level officers, people enjoy the benefits of working for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was the most premier law enforcement agency at one time. We were ranked #2 behind Los Angeles years ago during that particular time. I want to restore that prominence back to this agency. This is a great agency, one of the greatest agencies on planet Earth, and we have to restore it back. And what I intend to do is to build the morale up first, get everybody on the same page. Let's go back out to the community to build that trust. When we build that trust, we'll kill the street code of silence. We'll have a happy community, and we'll make Jacksonville one of the safest places in America.
Mr. Williams, if you want 30 seconds on this.
Well, I think when you talk about recruiting qualified candidates to this community, you have to offer them a good pay and benefit package. Yeah. You have to give them a great working environment, and we'll do that. And again, you've got to recruit men and women of character who want to serve this community. It is, at the end of the day, about building relationships in our community. That's how we'll get ahead of the crime issues that we face in our community long term.
Thank you, gentlemen. So let's talk about reducing crime and claims, and this came up a little bit earlier. I want to talk about this regarding Mr. Jefferson's claim to reduce crime by 25% the first year as sheriff. I think even you addressed it, Mr. Jefferson. That's a big number. So, Mr. Williams, the question is to you and then to you, Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Williams, how much crime will you reduce in your first year if 25% is too much?
I think you come in day one and you evaluate where you are. You evaluate where the trend in crime is, but you commit to reducing crime in this community by at least 5%, and you work on that every day. I tell you, if you look back in several years, you go again from 2011, and you look at the rates at which crime has increased, you've got to work to drive that number down, and we'll begin to do that day one. Look, it's about building relationships in the community. That's how we've been effective before, and I'll go back to 2011 again. We've been very effective with those resources. We were able to drive that murder total down, again, as low as it's been since 1970. You know, as we stand here today, we have a 43-year low in overall crime in Jacksonville, but clearly we have a violence problem. And the violence that we see here in Jacksonville is driven by the drug trade. I can tell you from my 23 years experience, the drugs drive most of the violence that you see here. It's interconnected with the gang issue that we face. It's interconnected with the illegal gun issue that we face here in Jacksonville. Targeting those issues is how you'll drive down crime in this community. And it will take more than a year to drive it down 25%.
And so, Ken Jefferson, to get at that 25% number, how much, or I guess, how did you arrive at that number, and how will you measure that? How will you quantify it that first year?
Listen, before I made that statement, I understood that 25% was a high number. I understood that. But I also understood that I can't do it alone. That's why my motto is, we can do better together. I'm going to empower the community to help me reduce this crime. Camden, New Jersey is a perfect example of how they drove crime down by 50% in 24 months. If they can drive crime down by 50% in 24 months, we together here in Jacksonville can drive down crime 25% in 1 year. And my opponent keeps saying, I'm going to do this and that and the other from day one. I can't wait for day one. That's why I'm out in the community. That's why I'm building the bridges now. That's why I'm resonating with people to build that trust up right now. I can't wait for May 19th to come to start. I've already hit the ground running. And when May 19th comes, we'll still be running. When July 1 comes, we'll be in full sprint mode.
So, Mr. Williams, how do you even get that 5%? Is it what he said, or is it a different idea you have?
No, I tell you, you know, when you look at, again, reducing crime in any community, if you look at the Camden, New Jersey example, a couple things happened there. Camden, New Jersey is 8 square miles, and they had an influx of officers that, again, allowed them to drive down crime significantly. And if you look around the country, Nashville, you know, San Diego years ago, even New York, the one thing that allowed people to sustain the gains that they made in reducing crime was additional officers on the street. And it's something, again, back to 2011, We've got a roadmap of how to reduce crime in this community. We've done it before. We just need to work to do it that way again.
All right, Mr. Jefferson, the part I asked earlier, maybe how do you measure it? How do you quantify that you have reduced it by 25% after a year?
Let me respond first before I say that. 8 square miles, Camden, New Jersey. When you look at the overall violent crime here in our city, it's about 20 square miles that the violent crime is consistently happening. It's not 800 square miles that is happening. Even though Jacksonville is comprised has 800 square miles in this city, all the crimes aren't happening all over. Yes, it touches here and it touches there, but the primary pocket of violent crime is about 20 square miles that we're doing. We can do it. If Camden, New Jersey can do it, we can do it as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. I'm going to move on. I want to ask about endorsements. Candidates often ask for endorsements from centers of influence in the community. And when it comes to this race, each of you have received endorsements from men who ran for this office previously but didn't make it to this election. So the question is, and I believe I'm beginning with Mr. Jefferson, did you or anyone on your staff discuss the possibility of a position within your administration for anyone who has endorsed you? So, Mr. Jefferson, that means Jimmy Holderfield or Rob Schoonover or anyone else.
Thank you for that question. I have said from day one, and it's been my position, that I have not promised anyone anything. After the primary, we were fortunate to come out on top, but understood that there was a lot of work to be done. I understood the value in these other men who were aspiring for this office. I reached out to Jimmy Holderfield. I reached out to Rob Schoonover. I reached out to Jay Farhead. I reached out to Tony Cummings. I reached out to everyone in this race. Two made the decision to come over without a promise, without an implication of a promise of anything. They said, and I quote, "This is the right man at the right time for such a time as this, and we're going to support you."
All right, thank you, Mr. Jefferson. To sum that up or make that specific to you, Mr. Williams, did you or anyone on your staff discuss a possibility of position within your administration? That would include Jay Farhat or Lonnie McDonald or anyone else.
Right. No, we've made no promises to anybody. You know, we're in the middle of a race, and there'll be time for that, you know, to picking staff positions and that type of thing after the election is over and during the transition period. But we've made no promises to anybody. You know, when it comes to endorsements in this race, I'm proud of several that I have. I have the endorsement of the Florida Times Union. I have the endorsement of the Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce. I have the endorsement of 5 regional sheriffs to include Sheriff John Rutherford. You know, I have the endorsement of Jay Farhat and Lonnie McDonald, 2 former sheriff's candidates. And I have the endorsement of Congressman Ron DeSantis for my work in Homeland Security at the state level. So I'm honored to have all those endorsements, and especially honored to have Lonnie and Jay's endorsement. We all worked together for several years. They ran a great race, and I was honored to have them come on board.
All right. I will say I have several endorsements as well. I won't go down the litany of the endorsements, but I'm honored to have each and every one of them. I'm honored to have the endorsement of Jimmy Holderfield. I'm honored to have the endorsement of Rob Schoonover. And those are men that had illustrious careers within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and I'm very honored to have those endorsements.
All right, Mr. Williams, last word on this.
Yeah, you know, and I failed to mention the Northeast Florida Builders Association and the Northeast Florida Association of Realtors.
You probably didn't offer them a position within the agency.
I did not, but I wanted to put that in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Flashbang.
Gentlemen, let's talk maybe about personal character a little bit here, and I want to get at it this way. As sheriff, and this was a viewer question that we thought was important. As sheriff, you're going to be responsible for making decisions that affect the lives and welfare of the citizens of Jacksonville, as well as the well-being of the police officers in your agency. So this viewer said, please explain a situation in your professional career where you had to make a tough decision that affected the well-being of the greater community, or one that directly affected the professional career of an officer within the agency. And I begin with you, Mr. Williams.
I can tell you that I've made many decisions like that in my time as not only the director, but moving up through the chain as the assistant chief and the chief of Homeland Security. I served as the incident commander for high-risk incidents for our agency. So we're making life and death decisions on numerous call-outs at any given time throughout the period of a year. So again, we were successful in those, and again, those decisions can be very challenging, but we were able to make good decisions in that point. And I've made tough decisions that have impacted officers' lives. Look, as the chair of the Response to Resistance Board, I've made decisions that impacted officers' careers, and in some cases ended officers' careers. And that's not a decision I take lightly. But I think accountability is important for law enforcement. And if we don't hold each other accountable, then we can't expect to gain the trust of the community. So those are things, again, that I have a track record of doing, and I'm not just talking about, that I've actually done.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Jefferson?
You know, we've heard the phrase or the expression, the thin blue line, and people give the implication that we always look out for our own, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, and that's so far beyond the truth. I've had the occasion to affect an officer's life by having to be a witness against an officer for an allegation of something that was done. It affected his life, but it also affected me because it was the right thing to do. And any time I come across a situation like that, I'm always going to do the right thing, whether it hurts or whether they feel that it's not the right thing. But you always want to do the right thing.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. I want to squeeze in one more question here, so I'm going to limit your answers to about 30 seconds, if that's all right. And Mr. Jefferson, I'm going to begin with you. Sheriff Rutherford recently told us that we do not have a trust issue in the city between officers and the public because people still call 911 when there's an emergency. They still want police to show up. How do you feel about Sheriff Rutherford's statement? Is that accurate in your opinion?
We're the only law enforcement agency in town. Who else are they going to call? No, it's not an accurate statement. There is a large distrust between the community and the sheriff's office. I see it, I hear it every day. When I'm spending the night in neighborhoods, they want to feel relevant. They want to know that you care. A lot of these people only see the police officers 3 different occasions: when on a traffic stop, if they're being arrested, or if they're on a call for service. We've got to get the officers out of the cars, back into the communities.
All right. Mr. Williams, how do you feel about that statement?
I'll tell you, I don't think 911 is a good gauge, but I will say this. You know, as Director of Investigations and Homeland Security, I had oversight of every criminal investigation conducted by JSO, and I can tell you that we solve cases in Jacksonville at a rate that is above the national average, and in some cases double digits above the national average. And we're only able to do that because we have a good relationship with the community, and they do call us every day and give us tips and give us information to help us solve those crimes. But you can never take your eye on the ball. You can never take that for granted, and you have to be down in neighborhoods working to build relationships every single day.
Yeah, Mr. Jefferson, 30 seconds.
Because you're getting calls, that means you have a good relationship. You're sitting behind the desk waiting for them to come to you to call. As your sheriff, I cannot govern an agency from behind the desk. I cannot govern a community from behind the desk. I will be from behind the desk into the communities, working with the officers that serve us every day, working with the community to build that trust. But not only I, my senior staff on down, to include the line level officers, we're going to get out of the cars, we're going to take our streets back together. That's leadership.
All right, Mr. Williams, last word here, and we'll move on.
Well, I spent my entire 23 years in JSO. Every day of that 23 years was spent fighting crime in the community, not sitting behind a desk, but being out again, fighting crime and engaging the community at many different levels.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. And in just a moment, these candidates are going to make their closing statements for us. As they do, we want to hear what you say. This is what I mentioned a moment ago. We want to hear from you. What do you say about who won tonight's debate? So go to news4jax.com, or on your mobile device, go to the News4Jax mobile app and give us your opinion. You can only vote once, and then we're going to bring you results in just a few moments. Now we begin our closing statements, and again by coin flip about 7 o'clock tonight. Mike Williams, you're going to begin. Each of you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you tonight. Thank you to Rick Mullaney and the Public Policy Institute. We appreciate the opportunity. Listen, you've seen tonight there are major differences between my opponent and I. I spent 23 years serving this community and spent every day of that 23 years fighting crime in Jacksonville and leading the men and women of JSO in that fight. I led 1,100 police officers every day and managed half of our agency's $400 million budget. I make decisions in my personal and professional life that are grounded in my faith, that are accountable to my family and to this community, and they're based on real experience. I know how to get the most out of our organization, and I know how to use that to keep our families safe in this community. There are people in this agency that need leadership, and I'm here to provide it. There's a new generation of leadership at JSO, and I'm ready to lead it. My name is Mike Williams, and I'm asking for your vote on May 19th. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Jefferson.
Kent, thank you. WJXT, Rick Mullaney, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And thank you all for coming, and as well as the viewers. I spent 24 years with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, and during that time, I held several leadership positions within the agency. My background, my track record proves that I have tested leadership that has been successful. Right now, this race is about who is connected to the community. It's about who can lead this organization and change the complexion of how we do law enforcement here in our city. If you're satisfied with the way things are going right now in Jacksonville, I need not tell you, don't vote for me. But if you're ready for change, if you're ready for us to build the trust back up with the community, if you're ready to forge a relationship, I ask you to join me. I ask you to help me, because we can do better together. I look forward to being your next sheriff. My name is Ken Jefferson, and I ask you for your vote on May 19th. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. And I want to give you an opportunity just to thank maybe those folks. As you've seen throughout our debate, the Terry Concert Hall is filled with people tonight who are interested in your answers, and many of them are supporters of yours. So thank you very much to all of them as well tonight. So for the past 4 minutes, we've been asking what you say. Who won tonight's debate? We just closed the online voting, and the winner is at the bottom of your screen there. And I'm not going to announce it here for you. You'll go home and find out what it is. But the voting is there. We've closed the voting, and so that's a little bit of a sample here. And now I'll tell you, 54% in favor of Mike Williams tonight. Tonight is, of course, that's a non-scientific poll. And ultimately, who wins happens at the ballot box. So tomorrow night, we're going to invite you to join us again for our mayoral debate. Democratic Mayor Alvin Brown and his Republican challenger Lenny Curry. They are right here facing off in this one-hour debate starting at 8 p.m. And if you're going to be away from a TV, you can watch the debate, as you could tonight, on newsforjax.com or on our News for Jax mobile app. And then Tuesday, after you cast your vote, make sure that you join News for Jax for complete coverage of the results on election night. You know, polls open at 7, they close at 7. As soon as those results start coming in after 7 p.m., we're going to bring them to you on Channel 4 and newsforjax.com. As a matter of fact, starting at 8 o'clock that night, we're going to have special live coverage on newsforjax.com leading up to the 10 o'clock news. So we just did that You Say poll. That is unscientific, non-scientific. The real results, who wins and who loses, is up to you. And of course, early voting is still underway through Sunday, and then we get to Election Day this coming Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to see you in one more hour for the 10 o'clock news. Thank you to our candidates and to Jacksonville University and the Public Policy Institute for hosting us tonight. Thanks for joining us. Good night. So,
where is Jacksonville University? It's where you're surrounded by beauty. It's where you can expect excellence. It's where you choose the path that suits you. It's where opportunity is attainable. It's where outcomes are the focus. Jacksonville University is a premier private college in Northeast Florida. For 80 years, we have helped students reach their potential and achieve long-term success. Jacksonville University. You could be here.